So far tonight, we've discussed two big stories, impeachment and the Iowa caucuses. And an interesting thing is happening. Political worlds are colliding. Now, take a listen to Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa, trying to tie the two together.
I'm really interested to see how this discussion today informs and influences the Iowa caucus voters, those Democratic caucus goers. Will they be supporting Vice President Biden at this point? Not a
You could see the glee there in the senator when she tried to make the connection. Also, there is a growing split in the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, obviously, right in the middle of it, as he was 4 years ago, as I mentioned earlier with former Senator Dorgan. Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, they are worried that Bernie will damage the party by dragging it too far left. Of course, they're both former nominees, so they have some stick within the party still. I want to bring in my next guest. Emily Tisch Sussman is a Democratic strategist and host of the podcast, Your Primary Playlist. And Emily, you in fact had an interview with Hillary Clinton where, among other things, she talked about the fears of Bernie, but she also thought that the whole caucus premise in Iowa was undemocratic. I've heard other people say it's against the self-interest of the Democratic Party, given the makeup of Iowa, not reflective of the national demographic and more so how they pick a candidate. You think they're more right than wrong? That doesn't make sense?
I have to say, having been at the caucus in 2016, it's pretty weird. Like, it's a pretty weird way to pick a nominee and allocate delegates that go to the convention. People don't just get to walk in and vote the way that you would think about voting in a way that works for your schedule. They have to actually show up in person in the same place and then negotiate with their neighbors, and they have to allocate a lot of time for it. And an undisclosed, like, you don't know how long it's going to go. It could be 2 minutes long, it could be 3 hours long. So what I heard all over caucus night was people saying they really wanted to be able to get out there and caucus, but they couldn't. Either they didn't have transportation, they didn't have childcare, they didn't have elder care, they were working. So, I mean, if we really want people involved in the process, it's not the best way to do it by a long shot.
I've been accused of some of being a Hillary apologist. She was the senator from where our studios are based here, and she was very good to us in the past. But I'm sorry. I agree with her when you look at the Sanders record in terms of accomplishments or lack thereof. I watched in the run-up to the Super Bowl, I endured the Hannity interview with the president where he said, you know, he's socialist, but he's really communist. You can see how this will play out. Only the Democrats could possibly elect someone seemingly that's not only the wrong messenger, but with the wrong message. The signature issue you get through with the ACA, you're now going to try and undo the whole thing? I mean, how scared do you think the party leadership here is that somehow, some way, maybe he won't get the nomination, but he's going to create chaos at the convention here? I'm talking about Sanders.
It is definitely daunting. Look, supporters of Sanders believe that he will be a unifier and that he will bring new people into the party and others will come along with him. But when I interviewed Hillary Clinton this last week, and she said that the question that I had posed to her was, how would he bring supporters who are not people who are not his supporters right now? If he is the nominee, how would he bring them along to support him? And what she said was, well, he wasn't able to do it in 2016. He gave no indication to his supporters that he should bring them along. And quite frankly, from surrogates we've seen all in the last weekend of the Sanders campaign, they've been asked this question over and over. If he is the nominee, because there is such a split party, there'll be so many candidates in the race, if he does clinch the nomination, how would he bring along people who do not naturally support him? Because his message is basically, you know, you're with me or you're against me. And nobody can give a really good answer to that. They're all kind of repeating this message that you're either with him or you're wrong. So that is very scary to a lot of Democrats. And I think that's why we could potentially start seeing some deal making from candidates who get some delegates out of Iowa or maybe some delegates out of New Hampshire, but they clearly don't have a path to go to the convention. I think we're going to start to see some deal making among candidates to try and to get those candidates, the lower polling candidates, to support them and consolidate delegates.
You know, Emily, for some smart people that are on the trail, even attached to campaigns, they say the thing that's worrying them when it comes to Sanders, it's not Iowa, New Hampshire, that he's polling pretty good in Nevada, which isn't lily white here. And that says he's going to be all the way to the convention here, and he's got a bigger base than Democrats may want to admit. How soon is it getting late for Biden in that obviously Bloomberg's waiting there? If there's not a legitimate moderate that's going to try and fill the breach, he and $2 billion of his dollars, and who knows where he'll cap it off, he's ready and waiting. How much of a runway do you think Biden has before people say, you had your shot, we're going to look at Mayor Mike here or someone else?
Well, you're asking exactly the right question, because of course we're looking at the candidates today. We're looking at the candidates who are actually on the ballot in Iowa. But Bloomberg is this big looming question that's out there. Look, the two states where Biden is doing very well right now are he's still doing well in Nevada. It's so the order of the states is the first four before Super Tuesday. It's Iowa, New Hampshire, both primarily white states, then Nevada that has a strong Latino and Asian American populations, and then South Carolina. So Biden is doing pretty well in Nevada. He is running the show in South Carolina. Like, there's no wall that can break the support for Biden in South Carolina. But he does have to do reasonably well. Like, he does have to do perform top three in Iowa and New Hampshire. I'd say that's basically the runway before his supporters start to drop off a little bit in later states like Nevada and South Carolina. We look at South Carolina as being incredibly important, both because it's the first state in the South, and the South is very delegate rich for Democrats. And also, it's the first state that has a majority of African-American voters voting in the Democratic primary. African-American voters, particularly African-American women, are the strongest voting and most reliable voting Democratic bloc. You cannot win an election, a national election, without having enthusiasm from the African-American voters. So we looked at that as an indication. But this year, there will actually be not that long to be talking about South Carolina, because Super Tuesday is just 3 days later. And Super Tuesday is basically a national primary. There's so many states, there's so many delegates up for grabs, and that's where Bloomberg is really running a strong game. He's only in Super Tuesday states. He's all over the place, whereas the rest of the campaigns still have to compete in the first four before him. It's not a great system. It's not the best. It's never been done before. We really don't know what the impact is going to be, but it's definitely going to cut into everybody else's strategy.
Emily, do you think there's been a lot made that all of a sudden Bloomberg and the rules might change so he can get on the debate stage, et cetera, that there's a feeling among the other candidates that down deep, the DCCC, DSCC, DNC, they want Bloomberg on the ticket with all his money and that he'd do better in a general? Or do you think they're just being conspiratorial and paranoid at this point?
I don't know if I go so far as to say conspiratorial. I think that the DNC, who runs the Democratic presidential debates, is so nervous about being fair to every single candidate and everybody getting the same access and everybody getting the same airtime. I mean, they will not plan beyond any point. Like, they're not planning into a general election, I think, actually to a fault, because they want to see who the nominee is. They do not want to weigh the hand at all. I think by them considering allowing him on the debate stage is basically well, I guess now they are, is really answering the call from a lot of people who want to see him up against the other Democratic candidates. They want to know how he's going to fare. So I think the DNC is trying to serve two constituencies, people who are more engaged and who know how much access each campaign has and want to make sure that it's very, very fair and it's very, very neutral. But they're also trying to serve the public at large and Democrats at large who really want to see Bloomberg up there and want to see how he does against the other candidates.
All right. It'll be an interesting how tonight turns out, and certainly tomorrow in Washington and D.C. Emily, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, we come back. It was a simple mistake in a tweet about the Super Bowl, but for a lot of people like me, it's pretty telling when it comes to our president. I'll explain here what I'm talking about after the break.